Hi everyone, it's Debbie, or Dealer4519 on YouTube. I'm going to take a moment to remind you that at this point, I have been sent back to my home, but there's a restraining order out for me against the woman who continues to beat me. Because of course, in the end, I'd like to think the courts cared about every child that stepped through the door, but they don't. But what they do care about is the money they have to pay foster parents because real parents don't want to take care of their children. They definitely care about that. But anyways, let's move on. So now they move out. Yes, you heard me. They moved out. And nobody said anything, just one day. And every day thereafter, there was nobody there but me. I lived by myself. Now, to remind you guys, I am 13 years old, and I'm living alone. And once I ran out of food, I didn't really know what to do. I guess it just got old. Well, it did get old for me. I realized finally at last that my mother was rejecting me. That there was another person in this world that she'd rather be around, and she'd rather not have a daughter. But 13 years after she should have given me up for adoption, she decides that's a day late and a dollar short, wouldn't you say? So weeks pass, and somehow I'm always gone when this happens. But once a week, my mother somehow sneaks in and leaves $10 in quarters, stacked in 4 quarters, so it's 10 stacks of 4 quarters, which is $10 on the kitchen table. That's not going to feed me, okay? Even though it's 1983, if I went to the store, $10 in quarters, no, it's not going to go very far. And yes, I could cook by then because, well, I was a latchkey kid at 8, so you kind of figure out that eventually somebody had to teach me how to use a stove. We didn't have microwaves back then, but I'll move on. So, I'm not real sure how long it went on, but it went on long enough. And yes, I went to my friend's house, and I ate there sometimes, but their parents could not afford another mouth to feed either. So, I guess a month might have passed, but I eventually called the police, and I said, look, you've got to come get me. I'm starving to death. Nobody's doing anything. My mother hasn't been here in who knows how long. I can't live like this. And, the dispatcher lady, well, how old are you? I'm 13. What? Your mother hasn't been there? And I said, I haven't laid eyes on her in weeks. So a policeman comes to the house and he checks the freezer, the refrigerator, the cabinets. He says, come on. So off we go. This time I take more clothes because I don't know what's going on. And how they're going to notify her, that's another story. But this time, it's much worse. They put me in a foster home in Michigan City, Indiana. And they had like 5 teenagers and one of their own, I think. 5 foster teenagers, maybe 6. Anyway, we'll just skip that for a moment. They made a living off of us kids. They didn't cook, we did. They didn't do dishes, we did. They didn't clean, we did. They didn't do laundry, we did. Everyone was assigned a set of chores that they would do. Raking was the boys' jobs, cutting the lawn was the boys' jobs, and the indoor work, the house cleaning, the dusting, the vacuuming, all of that went to the girls. I guess the only good thing that happened while I lived there was I saw the movie E.T., I think. If it wasn't E.T., it was another blockbuster. But I'd have never seen that if I were living with my mom because, she's just not going to take the time to take me to the movies. But anyway, let's skip that. Let's move on. I'm there, and I was a smoker when I got there, and I might have skipped this part. Cigarettes were 90 cents a pack, and I don't remember what they were a carton when I started, and I was 11 years old. So there were no laws forbidding children from smoking back then. So they put me in a foster home where I could smoke. And I was given a pack a day. Well, that's pretty good, because most foster parents aren't going to let you smoke, even outside, which is where we had to go, obviously. And they didn't smoke, so, they didn't want it in their house. And it just, you could do other chores to get extra money, but this was definitely not working for me, because I had never seen a teenager farm, which is what that felt like. It felt like, a teenager farm where you just take these teenagers and they just run everything, and it was really creepy. It really was. So, I stayed for a couple weeks, and it's an absolute nightmare. So, the oldest girl foster child accused the husband of the wife of the foster parents of rape, and everybody was moved immediately. But I had a court date, and I don't know how they found my mom. Maybe they sent it to her job, which, looking back now, she deserves so much more. But she showed up and she said, we're not going to obey a restraining order. You cannot tell me who's in my life and who's out of my life, and. So I was sent to. No, I was sent home. And this went on and off, mostly off, because at this point I had learned that I'm figuring out at a very young age, with no training or education, that the person I'm dealing with is a paranoid schizophrenic. I don't know where I come up with that, but I told my mother, I was almost 14, when I told my mother, this woman is schizo. I'm not making that up. That's not just a term I'm saying. In fact, I had never said that before, because back in the 80s, we had other words for people, but schizo was not one of them. And it says she's a schizo, and you don't know what it's like, because every day you don't know what you're walking into, what mood she'll be in, or, well, of course, my mom didn't believe me. She thought I was crazy. But in 1998, or 7 or 8, probably 8, she asked me that if she died, because Gail was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic in 97. So if something happened to my mom, would I at least make sure she got to her brother's house in Pennsylvania, yada, yada, yada. And, at that point I was about to be 30 years old, and my mom and I were getting along, because I lived in Alabama and she lived in Indiana, so that's why we were getting along. And I agreed. I said, of course, certainly, no problem. I guess, though, even though my mom were older, when I agreed to that, and I still harbored a lot of animosity for the next few years that you'll hear about, it never dawned on me that my mom would die first. It just didn't. So throughout my 8th grade year, now mind you, now that I said all this, my grades were still A's and B's and C's in science. I really didn't like science, but everything else was an A and a B, and I was doing good, and I was a good student. In fact, the spring of my 7th grade year, I got in a fight with a girl in the hallway. And our principal, Mr. Berta, who has passed away, God rest his soul, he was a great man. He was vice principal at the junior high. And he said, I'm supposed to, policy-wise, paddle them and suspend them both. But Debbie is such a good student that I can't do it, because if I do it to one, I have to do it to both. And he told that to the parents. I was in the room, but he told that to our, when the parents got there. So that was pretty much, ego lifting for me. I got a Saturday class. It was 7 hours of hell, because really I didn't have any homework. They don't give you homework on a weekend. At least they didn't used to. So really I just had to read a book, and I read the whole thing in that 7 hours. I was allowed to bring a drink and a lunch. Anyway, I'll pick this up in another video. I just want you guys to know that I didn't forget you, and this is very painful for me. So hang in there, okay? Thanks. See you soon.